This one is called Evan Ravitz, Checks and Balances. Oh, I better pause. Sorry about that. I had to put a towel at the base of the door so I don't disturb the other guests. Although it's pretty apparent it's a tweaker motel. The guy who runs the place, he's trying to do something about that. One of the rules that he has is only 2 people in a room. God, my knee itches. Alright, so in order to ensure that the cops do their jobs, it's called a system of checks and balances, civilian oversight. There's a guy named Victor King, and he's part of the Civilian Oversight Committee in Boulder, Colorado. He's also a friend of mine. I have reached out to him repeatedly for help. Obviously not a happening thing. Now there's a lot of videos where I'm very angry. I'm having a panic attack or a meltdown over the fact that I can't get any help going in person. Right now, Mandy Singer was my last hope. She can't because of family issues. She also can't assist me with all of this stuff because of family issues. She is not a bad person for this. Orange juice, high in ascorbic acid, good for the immune system. At the beginning, I had all sorts of people like Karamia, aka Cara Rogers, telling me that their families were being threatened. And people like Layla Johnson doing some pretty screwed up stuff. And people like Candace Bondurant telling me that she was afraid for her kids. And then I had Danica Garner telling me that she was afraid for hers. And Rochelle Shelley Campbell telling me she was afraid for hers. And a lot of others. So I went to a motel that a woman named Haley, who used to work at Starbucks, hooked me up with. Well, she was gonna come help me, her and her husband, and they didn't. I was a little bit late, well, a lot late getting there. I had to go to get a computer with Brandon Ratner. Brandon Ratner was gonna help me, but he couldn't because he had to go chase some tail. But he at least gave me the ride. The problem with all these people is that no matter how hard I tried, they didn't do anything. The stories are true. The recordings that I'm making, I try to explain it, but it's just too much. There is too much involved. People want me to type it out and write it out, and it's been written, it's been typed, it's been all sorts of stuff. The problem is getting someone to look at it and getting someone to read it. Now, in all of my videos, I'm going to be posting a link to folks playing victim and links to conversations with witnesses. The checks and balances. That's where you have someone go in with you when you have to speak to law enforcement, because if it's just you, law enforcement is far likely to try to intimidate you and threaten you, especially if you talk about bad cops. in this situation, the crimes committed by the law enforcement community cannot be separated from the crimes committed by the judicial system, and as well the crimes committed by the Bollingers and their family, their extended family, their internet nut jobs, and so on. It's a big giant mess. And then of course law enforcement keeps outright lying or manipulating the facts or omitting evidence that shows the truth so that they can try to twist it to pretend that I'm some nut job. Now with all of these conversations, yes, I need other people to write it down. I need them to send it to law enforcement. And I need them to make a copy and send it to me. I don't mean like, well, we'll send one copy to law enforcement and then we'll send another one to Sean. No, it needs to be sent to me the way that I do. That way they know that they are being checked and balanced. With Natalie Bollinger's email, yeah, sure, there's pictures of it up. But also, when I send it out, if there's more people that I add to the list to send it to, then when I send it, anybody who looks at that link or sees that link sees who else has taken a look at it. That assists in the system of checks and balances. So, any of you who want to type your email address in the comments section, first of all, keep in mind that you may get other people who see your email address and decide to harass you. However, if you choose to do that, I will send all of you the message from Natalie Bollinger from June 30th of 2016 when she told me about her father. You will also get to see that I have sent that to law enforcement, and I have sent it to Mandy Hughes. Her name on there is Pharmaca Mom or something like that. You'll be able to recognize it based on that brief description. It's not exactly Pharmaca Mom. It might be like Pharmaca Mom 123 or something, but that's her. I believe. Let me make sure. She actually, I believe, had two of them. The one that says nonsense, that's Shannon Alvarado. I guess the thing I should really point out the most is that all of these people that I was asking for help, hey, I need you to help me turn this in. I need a system of checks and balances. An at-risk adult cannot turn something into the cops without a system of checks and balances. Someone has to be there so they don't get blown off. Someone has to be there so that people don't tone bully them. Someone has to be there so that when the cops lie outright and say that they can't do something, that at least there's someone there as a witness. Now, even better than a witness is the ability to record it. But you probably should record it with a witness present. That way, if they pull anything, your witness has access to that. So if they try to arrest you for trying to turn in bad cops, your witness can post it up, like what Zaid Atkinson did. That's checks and balances. Those cops did wrong. Somebody was there to balance the situation, and those people were not able to commit the crimes that were not able to get away with committing crimes that they did. The police do that to the homeless all the time. Zaid Atkinson got lucky because he was black. Straight up. If he'd have been a actual homeless person, they would have fucking beat his ass. That guy at the door was his system of checks and balances to keep his face from getting creamed on the pavement. But there's also the fact that because he was black, people wanted to make a big deal about it. People don't give two shits that they do that to homeless people every fucking goddamn day in Boulder. Boulder police are fucking ruthless to the homeless. But nobody cares. Zaid Atkinson lived in the house, so he's more human than we are. He's black, so he's more human than we are. That's not acceptable. That's racism and classism. And obviously, those cops confused him for a homeless person. You can tell that in the first 2 fucking minutes of the video. The first 2 minutes of that goddamn body camera, you can tell that he's being harassed because the cops assumed that he's fucking homeless. And by the time they realize that he's not, it's already too late. Now, Evan Ravitz, I sent out an email link, and Evan Ravitz says, Evan Ravitz, founder, strengthen direct democracy. And then he types, why? You can still fool some people, fool some of the people some of the time, but you can buy most politicians most of the time. So he's a rights activist, sort of, but like most of you, he doesn't take an active involvement or an active role. Bitching on Facebook doesn't do shit. That is not a system of checks and balances. Now, I added him to the list of, when I send something out to law enforcement, sorry about that, I had to go get rid of the second half of that lung in the toilet. With Evan Ravitz being a part of that email string, that's more likely to get law enforcement to actually take a look at it, because they see that it's not just being sent to law enforcement. This is because law enforcement has repeatedly informed me that they can't see what it is that I've sent them. Holy shit. How can they not? So if I make sure that there are other people there, especially someone like Evan Ravitz, who, you know, it says founder, strengthen direct democracy, you know, that right there, that is intimidating to a police officer. That someone who writes something like that might actually expose them if they don't do their fucking jobs. Of course, what did he write? He wrote, Sean, I'm not wasting any more time trying to piece together your jigsaw puzzle. Now, if I send you the other messages, he never did. I just needed him here as a system of checks and balances. That's what I needed before Natalie was killed. That's what I needed after Natalie was killed. And it seems like nobody has brains enough to realize that. Checks and balances. I'll continue though. He types, you need to write down everything that happened, starting at the beginning and ending at the end, with links to recordings and other supporting information. Not your opinions, not your feelings, not your philosophy, just the facts of what happened, with full names of participants and witnesses. He also types, I am not a lawyer. I don't know many lawyers. I can't help you. You must do the work of making it an understandable story with proof of what you say. Then somebody might help you. Remember, millions of people are rotting in prison and some being tortured, so you may not be first in line. Well, here's the thing, is that my story can change the laws that allow innocent people to be victimized. Change the laws. We don't need to make it more illegal to do this shit to black people. We don't need to make it more illegal to do this to disabled people. We have plenty of laws in place already that do that. What we do not have is a system of checks and balances. Now, with this, law enforcement has continually broken the law, misled the situation in order to obviously make sure that I'm put through the ringer in the courts. Meanwhile, without anybody there, they get away with it. Checks and balances. So basically, what Evan Ravitz did here is throw me under the bus. Now, whether he did it intentionally or not is arbitrary. Now, in our Facebook Messenger, let me make sure I got this right. I typed to him, I already knew you weren't a lawyer. I sent it as a measure of checks and balances. I won't send anything else, and I'm not going to add him to any more of those lists. I can't have him throwing me under the bus, but he talks about generalizations. He doesn't share anything. He's not a bad dude, he's got his own life to live. I also typed to him, also, the fact that you typed that in a thread with law enforcement, and it was a dick move. It would have been better to private message me. I assume you didn't know it was to law enforcement. So obviously I'm not trying to claim that Evan Ravitz is some sort of a horrible monster, because, well, that just simply is not the case. But what is it that I forwarded it? What is it that I sent? Well, it's a conversation with Tara Smith that was taken October 15th of 2020. And I was trying to turn in abuse. She admits in that recording, now obviously it's got information for people that need to be protected, so I didn't send it out. Obviously, right on my YouTube channel, it's got some private information that, well, ain't for everybody to know. The kind of stuff that you're not allowed to post up on YouTube or Facebook. And I do make sure that I check everything and make sure that the things that I'm posting are not going to get me banned or whatever. But I also sent this to Megan, that's my autism advocate, Marcia Estrada, FXIE Lady 50. I don't know who that is. I think that might be one of the people that was, I get spam. People trying to hook up with me or whatever from God, who knows. But that might be one of them, and it might be somebody who was actually trying to help. I also sent it to Lisa Green. I sent it to myself and my little sister. I sent it to Sarah Bacon. I sent it to storiesatlifeoftheinnocent.com. I also sent it to one of the ladies on YouTube who was telling me that she wanted to be supportive. She doesn't often check her messages, so I mean, it's pretty much useless. If you don't look at your messages but once every 6 months, or even once every 2 weeks, you're not going to be able to help. I sent it to Joe Akins at Sydney Police Department and Colorado Donkey Watch. Oh God, yes. I'm going to post a link to Colorado Donkey Watch here as well. Colorado Donkey Watch. That channel is actually where I learned what Waylon Lolatai's name was. With all of this, when I needed to turn in what was happening, I needed someone there in person as checks and balances to prevent law enforcement from doing what they obviously did. I also needed the equipment to be able to record everything, and it takes a lot to record all of this. I mean, there was a lot of bullshit that I had to deal with before Natalie was killed. A lot of it. I mean, just going through and recording the, taking screenshots of the stuff between me and Natalie, and me and Alicia, and me and Maddie Boa. I mean, that took a lot. And then there's Tim Beeson. God, that guy was such a fucking douche. Also, I sent it to Jeffrey Ritter, and Jeffrey Ritter is with the Colorado Coalition of the Homeless. He's one of the people in my stories. A lot of these people are people from my stories. Now, I have been told I probably shouldn't use the word stories. This is what Mandy Singer said. Probably shouldn't use the word stories because it makes it sound like fiction. That's a point that I've made before. So, I mean, she's pretty astute. She's a lot more intelligent than even sometimes she gives herself credit for. She is highly intelligent. In this video, actually it's an audio recording with Tara Smith, you know, it's got Leslie Snell in it, and it's got Sheriff Scott DeCosta in it, and of course I have to mind my P's and Q's because the Dual County Sheriff was there. And he was also the guy I was trying to turn in. But also in the conversation, she admits that she spoke with me in 2018 and that she couldn't remember any of it. Meanwhile, in 2018, I was trying to turn in Jared Hahn and Cody Selhorst. And of course, Jared Hahn was standing right there while I was talking to Miss Tara. And where I was speaking with her was right outside of Pumpkin Pantry. This system of checks and balances is essential for democracy to work, and also for our justice system to work. These systems of checks and balances need to be in place. With Dan Favorite, he wasn't understanding, well, by his own description, he was having a different understanding of the evidence. Yes, I do need someone to go in with me as a system of checks and balances, but I also need people to come forward about what they know. I need them to write it down in their own words because mine are not being heard. Also, I need copies of that so that I can take it to court. No matter how many times I explained that, people just weren't getting it. Now, these people, had they been able to do that, had they been capable of doing that, it would have been much different. By the time I attempted suicide at that hotel that Haley had gotten for me, by the time I attempted suicide there, that system of checks and balances had not existed for me at all. And it's not going to exist for me. I'm a disabled adult. People aren't going to pay me as much as they pay you because I'm different. I have different mannerisms. When these things happen, and I send these things out, I also try to make sure that there's a media news outlet involved in it. Whether they actually get involved or not is arbitrary. The fact that there is somebody from the news in that link, it shows that there's a possibility that they could be looking at it or could care. And that is a system of checks and balances to get these officers to do their goddamn jobs. All of this happened because there was a complete breakdown of checks and balances. There is also a complete and total breakdown of services for the disabled. The rights of an American citizen I'm supposed to have, that's right here. My rights as a disabled person, they're supposed to overlap. But without the system of checks and balances, they can create quite a crack for someone to fall through. These people are pissed off that I posted it on the internet. They're pissed off that I posted up the situations about them in the internet. At Shannon Alvarado's, I didn't record everything, even though I did feel the need. I was trying to respect her wishes, but while I was there, you can also see that because of the complete and total breakdown of checks and balances from my other so-called friends, and also having to deal with gaslighting by people like Carl Rogers and many others. Yes, I called up these people. I recorded our conversations. Those conversations verify that I was telling the truth about all of the help that I had tried to get. I needed that system of checks and balances in place. And to this day, everybody's got some excuse to look the other way. And now whether it's an excuse or a valid reason is neither here nor there. If you're not willing to come forward in court about it, it's an excuse. You're bullshitting me, and that's my stance on it. And if you're gonna say that you can't show up in court because your family's sick, you gotta tell them that. You have to come forward and be honest about that. Without that system of checks and balances, cops get away with whatever they want. They act differently. And of course, I've got a lot of recordings with officers. You can see the difference between when there is somebody there and when there's not. Some of the recordings that I have from when I was up in Bristol, Virginia with Brett Roloff show that the cops wanted to do some pretty fucked up shit. I had called the FBI trying to turn this information in to the FBI while in Virginia, and the people from the FBI called local law enforcement. Local law enforcement showed up and said, "A lady called us." No, not a lady called you. That was the FBI who I called. The FBI called them and had them come down to try to give me a welfare check. Had it not been for Brett Roloff, that's right, this drug addict who was digging through his own feces, was my system of checks and balances, because they stopped me in the road outside of Brett Roloff's house, and Brett Roloff came out and spoke to them and prevented them from hauling me off like I'm some sort of fucking nut job. I'm not a fucking nut job. I am overwhelmed. That is a tiny fraction of the evidence that I have. By the way, both of those suitcases are full too. This one here and that one there. And that's only a tiny portion of the written evidence that I've gone through. There's a lot of written evidence that I no longer have access to. It was stolen. Or, when I turned it in, the deputies in the jails threw it away. They also wouldn't allow me copies. Well, you have to have money for copies. Well, these are legal copies. You guys are supposed to allow me access to that. But then again, when you're trying to turn in officers or you're trying to turn them in, they don't allow you to do that. They'll make any excuse to deny you your right to those legal materials. There's also the fact that they deny you access to any of the slander. I didn't get to find out what all the slander was from people like Kara Johnson Miles until after I had already left. After I'd already been released from Arapahoe County Jail. But I wasn't released. I was sent to, well, I was sent to Larimer County. That's where Clearview is. This system of checks and balances is supposed to be in place for a reason. And that reason is because of exactly what I have been going through. These mandated reporters are supposed to go in with me. That's the thing. Let me show you this. Shit, I put it away already. Well, that's right. It's in some of my other videos. Oh, that might be it. No. It'll take some digging. I do have inmate statements. When I got my copy machine, the first thing I did was start photocopying inmate statements so that I could write a lot. But with paper stuff, you have to be able to make photocopies of it after you've written it out as well, and make sure that that's turned in. It's pretty obvious that I've been telling the truth if you go back through it all, but then there's the timeline, and that's where these officers and the volunteers have gotten away with the crimes that they've committed, is by completely omitting the timeline or jumping around. Now, Natalie and her family pretended like I threatened them in Virginia in 2016. Later on, I did threaten Ted, after Natalie was dead and after his third strike. Checks and balances. Now, with the fact that I did, in fact, threaten Ted Bollinger, then they can say, oh, well, see, we're telling the truth because he did threaten Ted. We've got evidence. Well, they destroyed that evidence. They're morons. So then after they destroy the evidence, they want to try to write that down. Well, they're lucky I'm an honest person, because I admit that that's absolutely what I did. I absolutely did. If he did anything, if anything happened to Alicia Bollinger, if anything happened to Danica Garner, if anything happened to Rochelle Shelley Campbell, if anything happened to any of their kids, if anything happened to Rose or any of her kids, I was trying to protect Natalie's family from Ted. Checks and balances. These people were allowed to get away with these crimes because I have no one in person, have not had anyone in person. Now, that's not to say that nobody ever did anything. A lot of people did things, and that's precisely the point. They needed to write it down. They needed to send it to me as well as to law enforcement. Checks and balances. Now, these people who said they couldn't do those things when there were blatant crimes being committed against me. But magically, they can do all of those things when they want to pretend that I've done those things to them. Kind of like, well, the situation with William Barr. There's a good one there. When I try to get help to ensure those systems of checks and balances, he wants to give me a whole goddamn spiel about his church and his God and his this, that, and the other. No, fuck you, Will. Shove it up your ass, bitch. What did he do when I threatened to take him to court? Did he give it to God? No, he didn't. He abused his power and abused a position that he no longer has because he was fired. Now keep in mind that William Barr is not a law enforcement officer anymore. But Waylon Lolatai is. And look at all of the crimes that were committed by Waylon Lolatai. Makes you wonder, don't it? So every video that I make after this, I'm going to attach folks playing victim and links to conversations with witnesses. And of course there's already 25 comments, it says, and they're all links to evidence that shows I've been telling the truth. Now, it'd be a lot easier if people would actually make an effort to write that shit down and send it in, and also send copies to me and to the media as a system of checks and balances. When I tried to kill myself in that hotel room that Haley had rented for me, I was glad for that room. I was glad for the help that was going to show up. I was glad for... There's a guy named Neil who was also an employee at Starbucks, and he did show up, but he showed up woefully unprepared, and he also borrowed his roommate's car, and he only had a couple of hours, and we had to go get supplies because his phone was almost dead. I needed his help going through these, well, web sleuth groups and the slander that they were spitting. Evan Ravitz is absolutely right about the timeline. But also, I've written out so much of it, it's not going anywhere. I need help in person. I need someone to go in with me to court. I need someone to be informed when they go in with me. Now, there were obviously people who did go in with me to my court dates. Graham went in with me to my court dates, but he was woefully unprepared for it, didn't know what the hell was going on, even though he had been paid to actually look at evidence. He'd never actually looked at it. He was also there for a lot of other situations, but when he showed up, well, all they did is postpone court and again and again and again. They also repeatedly did not notify me when they changed their minds. The thing is that Graham needed to write it down, and he did write it down on a piece of paper. Alright, he did write it down on a piece of paper that I had to go in with, and law enforcement said, well, how do we know you didn't write that? That's why Graham needed to write it down and send it in. He needed to make copies of it and also make a way to get a hold of him. A lot of the stuff that Evan Ravitz writes here, he's correct about. Just the facts of what happened with full names of participants and witnesses. And many of these people I'm not able to get a hold of because they're web sleuths with fake goddamn accounts. Merry Christmas, right? The other thing is, Evan Ravitz puts his phone number here in the email string, and that's not something that he can get rid of. It's stuck there. So anybody that I send this to from here on in is going to have Evan Ravitz's number. That's his fault, not mine. Also, it's evidence at this point. He also types, not your opinions, not your feelings, not your philosophy, just the facts of what happened. Well, I've done that over and over. I've sent copies of it out over and over. The problem is, I need people to be a system of checks and balances. Now, this is a pretty long video. I'm going to end it. Shannon Alvarado needs to write it the fuck down. She needs to send the evidence as well. If she'd have actually done that, it would have made a world of difference. Instead of having to argue with me, it won't do any good. Did you fucking try? Did you ever try? Did you ever try? If you're going to do it by phone, record the phone call. If you're going to write it down in an email and make sure that that is sent to law enforcement. All of these people whose names are on my Facebook and on my YouTube that I am pissed at, all of these people whose conversations are recorded show that the things that I wrote down are the truth. But they needed to write it down. They needed to write it down. They, as witnesses, needed to write it down and come forward. I have every right to be pissed off at them because most of these people are highly intelligent. As intelligent as they are, this should have been a no-brainer. But then again, common sense is the first thing to go when you're on drugs or alcohol, isn't it? Common sense is the first thing to go when you're pissed off. Common sense is the first thing to go when you're all butthurt, isn't it? You goddamn right it is.